You're listening to Smart Metals Radio from the Hard Assets Alliance.
Hello and welcome to the show with me, Andy Duncan, in London. Today my guest is the chairman of Casey Research, Doug Casey, who joins us from Uruguay. Today we'll be discussing his latest book, Right on the Money. Hello, Doug.
Andy, it's a pleasure to be here with you.
Fantastic. Now, last year I read your previous book, Totally Incorrect, on a plane in one journey. Now, it seemed totally complete to me at the time. What are you trying to achieve in this new book, which is different from the earlier one?
Well, this one is more financially oriented. And from that point of view, I think the timing is good because, as I've said many times, in recent years, in 2007, we entered a gigantic financial hurricane. And now for the last few years, we've been in the eye of the storm. I think we come out of the eye of the storm and back into the trailing edge of the hurricane this year before it's over. So the timing for a financial book is good.
Now, we've heard a lot today about HSBC in China with this $80 billion hole in its balance sheet. And people in the UK are being asked to justify why they want to take their own money out of banks. Do you think that this is a sign, a clear sign, that we are actually heading out of your eye of the hurricane?
Yes, it's one among many signs, I think. Really, all of these major banks are bankrupt. That's what the trillions of currency units that were created by the US and the Japanese and the Chinese over the last 5 or 6 years, they've all gone to support these gigantic failing banks that have idiotically lent a lot of their money, well, on all kinds of foolish things, but one of them is buying government debt. It's like a couple of drunks holding each other up, the governments and the big banks at this point, supporting each other. That's what actually happened in Cyprus, was that the Cypriot government, or I should say the Cypriot banks, bought a lot of Greek government debt. And then, of course, that debt collapsed and the banks collapsed. And then the European Central Bank had to come in and bail out the Cypriots. And this is likely to happen all over the world.
Now, the Soviet Union, that was also run by central planners, and strangely, they managed to keep that system going for 70 years. We've currently had our kind of Western system since 1971, which is about 42 years. How many more years do you think they can keep this kind of system going before, to my mind, it inevitably collapses?
Well, I think it was Adam Smith that first said there's a lot of ruin in a country. Now, when I'm here in South America, I don't spend most of my time in Uruguay. I actually spend most of my time in Argentina. And they're a bit of a template for the rest of the world, the way most of these world governments are acting. They've been going downhill in Argentina for 100 years now. But it's still a pleasant place to live. So I suppose it could go on a while longer, but there is something different about the U.S. Circling the drain, and that is that the entire world, the entire financial world is built not on the Argentine peso, which is an afterthought to everybody else. It's built on the U.S. dollar. So the Argentines can destroy their currency, and nobody cares but the people in Argentina. But if the Americans destroy the dollar, it's a worldwide disaster because there are about 8 trillion of the things floating outside the U.S. So this is potentially catastrophic on a worldwide scale.
Now, most empires, they tend to go in one of three ways. We've got the Soviet Empire, which just disappeared overnight. And then we've got the Athenian Empire, which disappeared after a long war with Sparta. And then we have a British Empire, or the Spanish Empire, which disappeared over 100, 200 years with lots of little setbacks along the way. Which way do you see the American Empire fading?
Well, that is a well-phrased question. And I've actually been thinking more about in terms of the Athenian Empire. Athens started out as a light to all the world. The Acropolis was kind of the original city on a hill. And then it gradually transformed itself from a beacon of philosophy and art and personal freedom into an actual empire, pretty much the way the U.S. has done, and became aggressive, got into the Peloponnesian War with the Spartans, and it all came undone. What is that phrase? History doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. Yeah. So we're a little bit like all of those empires, and a little bit like Rome, too, although it took Rome, depending on when we want to say Rome fell and when the collapse started, several hundred years to decline and fall. Could be any of the four, actually, or all of them.
Yeah, I think the Athenian Empire is quite close, actually, because we have the Delian League for NATO, we've got Sparta for China, and we've got Persia for the kind of the Russian Empire. Now, if we get back to the book, when I read it last week, it was, to me, completely different from Totally Incorrect, because Totally Incorrect, if we can use a kind of wine metaphor, was more of a kind of Beaujolais, whereas Right on the Money, to me, is more like a kind of more complex kind of Pinot Noir Burgundy. Now, we've got three major commandments coming out in Right on the Money, if I can list them for you, which keep being kind of stressed throughout the book. The first commandment is we should insure ourselves by having physical gold as a big part of our assets. The second commandment is if we do want to speculate, we should take account of the kind of volatility in gold mining to build up a life-changing fortune if we want to take that risk. And the third commandment is internationalize yourself as much as possible, both your assets and yourself. Now, are they all the three commandments in the book, or are there some more, or did I get those wrong?
No, I think you're quite correct. And I'm sure we can come up with corollaries to each of them. But yes, I think in the world that we're facing at the moment, those are three critical principles that everybody should pay close heed to. And you mentioned the gold mining stocks right now, which aren't an investment, they are a speculation. I should define these words. I like to define an investment as the allocation of capital to something that will create more wealth, that will create more capital. And gold mining stocks can be that, of course. But mainly they're a speculation. And I like to define a speculation as an allocation of capital to take advantage of politically caused distortions in the marketplace. And right now, gold is very unloved. It's hated. The mining stocks are as cheap in real terms by a number of parameters as they've ever been in history, actually. They're an explosive class of securities, the most volatile class of securities in the world. So I am of the opinion that people that buy the right mining stocks now are going to position themselves to make a gigantic amount of money over the next cycle. That's the way I see it.
Now, as an Austrian economist myself, I've got this theoretical belief that gold has to go up at some point, which will take the gold stocks with it when it does, once all of these ludicrous government interventions are finally revealed. But do you have a view on when gold's going to go up, or are you just hoovering up the gold while you can, while it's relatively cheap?
Well, I treat gold itself as the only financial asset that's not simultaneously somebody else's liability. Therefore, it's the best place to set aside capital that you want to preserve and you want to save. I buy it high, I buy it low, I buy it consistently whenever I have spare cash. So that's the way I treat gold. That said, from time to time, it can be a spectacular speculation as well. And I draw your attention to 1971, when the government was controlling it at $35 an ounce. They were unable to do so, and it exploded from 35 to over 800 over the subsequent decade. So it was a great speculation, in addition to everything else during the 70s. Then it was a nowhere land for 20 years. And by 2001, when gold was $250 an ounce, it was once again a fantastic speculation at $250 an ounce. It was actually cheaper in real terms than it was at $35 in 1971. And it had another 10-year bull market, fantastic bull market that took it up to 1900. Now it's come to 1250, 12.5. And I believe, once again, gold is a spectacular speculation, not because it's as cheap as it was those previous two times in real terms, but because the world financial and economic situation and political and social and military situation is far more explosive than it's been at any time in the recent past. So yes, I think that gold is once again an excellent speculation at this level.
Moving on to the second part of your book, you spend a long time with Louis James debating ethics rather than just straightforward finance and investment. To you, are these two topics linked together, or can they be completely separated?
Well, I hate to describe myself as a moralist, but I really do think that even if good doesn't always triumph, it should triumph. So I'm a great believer in doing the right thing. I think it puts the universe on your side from a karmic point of view. So sure, ethics is very tied up with money. And I'd say that also when I refer to most of the world, all of the world's currencies today. They're completely fraudulent. They're completely unethical. They've duped most of the 7 billion humans in this world to putting their savings into paper controlled by governments. And they're going to lose most of that wealth that represents. That's destructive. It's actually evil. So sure, economics is very tied up with ethics from a lot of points of view, in my opinion. And I'll mention another thing, too. It's that a lot of people are under the impression, or at least they mouth the platitude, that money is the root of all evil. Of course, the Bible, and St. Paul in this case, doesn't say that. It says the love of money is the root of all evil. But that's equally wrong. Actually, the love of money, and we're talking ethics here, is actually the root of all good. Why? Because money represents all the good things that you want to provide to other people, to have yourself. It represents real wealth that keeps the wolf from the door. So the love of money is actually the root of all good. St. Paul is wrong there, as he is in so many places. But yeah, getting back to that, I do spend a lot of time on ethics because ethics is very much tied up with economics, something that Paul Krugman and people like that are completely oblivious of.
Now, all the governments of the world, they want to take us away from the evil of money by taking all of our money off us. Another group of people who actually got the ethics right, of course, were the original American revolutionaries. Now, if you read something like Murray Rothbard's kind of book on colonial America, the 4-volume book, some states like Pennsylvania even had complete liberty for decades with virtually no government whatsoever. Yet we've gone from that, where Mr. Penn could hardly even get into Pennsylvania, and now we've got this Leviathan straddling the world. Where did it all go wrong in America?
Well, that's a good question. It actually perversely started going wrong right at the very beginning because one of the early laws that the U.S. It started going wrong with the formation of the United States, with the Constitution, actually. The Articles of Confederation, in my view, would have been a much wiser way to organize those colonies. So it started going wrong with the Constitution itself, which compared to other constitutions is not bad, but the Articles of Confederation were better. And of course, as soon as the government started meeting, the Alien and Sedition Acts, which Soviet-style legislation. But where did the U.S. really start going wrong? Okay, well, in the war between the states, which was totally unnecessary, highly destructive, turned Lincoln into a god, which is a shame, since he's, I'd say, probably the worst president the U.S. has had. Runs completely counter, I know, to the common mythology. Then America embarked on an imperial path with the Spanish-American War, where it acquired foreign colonies for the first time, central bank and the income tax in 1913, further down the slippery slope, World War I, the New Deal, World War II, and it's been accelerating, actually. So I can't put my finger on exactly where the U.S. went off the deep end, just like I'm not sure I can put my finger on exactly when the Roman Empire really started to decline and fall. But it's been going on for a while. The problem is this, is that the decline has been accelerating at warp speed over the last generation, and it's unstoppable at this point. So it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse from here until we reach a genuine crisis, and then we'll see what happens.
Do you think we have to go through a crisis, or could something fix it, such as maybe state secession, maybe Texas seceding, Alaska seceding, and so on? Or do you think, have to go through lancing some kind of boil and going through a depression?
Well, I'm all for places like Alaska and Texas seceding. I'd like to see all 50 states secede. And indeed, I'd like to see all 310 million U.S. citizens secede and each become independent. That's my ideal scenario, of course. But we're not going to reach that ideal. Look, a lot of people were counting on Ron Paul in the last election. They were saying, if only Ron is elected, he'll be able to change things and turn them around. And as much of a fan of Ron Paul as I am, personally, certainly, it wouldn't have worked, because even if Ron had been elected, I promise you, the first thing that would have happened after he was in office was he would have had a sit down from the heads of the various Praetorian agencies like the NSA and the CIA and the FBI and a dozen others, plus a whole bunch of generals and admirals, and they would have given him the facts. The facts is that we have the guns, we're in control, you're not going to change it. And if that didn't work, which it would have, he would have been impeached by the Congress for trying to unmock their game. And if that hadn't worked, the average American would have turned out into the streets like an angry chimpanzee, because most of them receive more from the government than they put into it, much more. And they think it's a cornucopia. They don't want the cornucopia to close down. So no, it's beyond redemption at this point.
It reminds me of a scene from I, Claudius, the BBC TV series, where Claudius was surrounded by the Praetorian Guard and there was nothing he could do about them. Now, if we could be a tiny bit more kind of futuristic, once we're through this Greater Depression, what do you think is going to be on the other side for us? Is everything going to be much better then?
Well, for the long term, I am optimistic because I do believe in what Jacob Bernowski termed the ascent of man. That's been going on since the end of the Ice Age, and it's going to continue. So that's a huge cause for optimism. And the reason that I believe that is because the average person who has to look out for his own interest, unless he's slopping at the state's trough, realizes intuitively that he's got to produce more than he consumes if he's going to have a future. And if he saves that difference, that builds capital. So that's a plus, and that'll continue. The second big thing that I look at is that there are more scientists and engineers alive today now than have lived in all of the world's history put together. And they will continue inventing and creating, and technology will continue improving, hopefully. So mankind's destiny is hopefully on the other planets and then in the stars. So that's the good news, and that's why I'm very optimistic. But on the other hand, whenever you have a political, economic disaster, it often turns into something like the French Revolution. And it was wonderful that they overthrew Louis XVI and got rid of him, but then he was replaced by Robespierre and then Napoleon. And the same thing was true in Russia in 1917. It was wonderful. They got rid of the Tsar, but they got Lenin and then Stalin. So that's very possible as a path that the U.S. is going to trod too. It's very rare when you get rid of the old regime that the next one to come up is better.
So the ascent of man is a good thing, but there's lots of volatility up and down on the way. Now, is this book series of Totally Incorrect and Right on the Money going to finish now, or is it going to continue?
Well, I don't know. It's hard to say because I still do things like this, and it might continue, but too much of a good thing. Well, Mae West said that was wonderful, but I'm spending all my time now working on a sextet of novels where I trace the history of our hero through 6 unjustly besmirched occupations. And I show that you can be a good guy if you're a speculator, if you're a drug lord, if you're an assassin, a terrorist, or for that matter, the Antichrist. So I'm using these 6 novels as a platform to explain a lot of things misunderstood about all these areas of human action.
I was a bit worried there when you said sextet, you were going to say something else. And I look forward to reading those books. Now, anyone listening, I read Right on the Money last week, and I think it's a fantastic book, and I thoroughly enjoyed reading it. I'd like to thank you today then, Doug, for your time. Thank you very much for being on the show today.
Well, my pleasure, Andy, and I always look forward to talking to you.
Subscribe to the Smart Metals Radio Show on iTunes. You can also visit us online at hardassets.com/radio, where you can subscribe to our free mailing list and receive our free Smart Metals newsletter. For anyone who wants to set up an account with the Hard Assets Alliance, as a special offer, we shall be waiving opening and setting up fees. Listeners who'd like to speak to a live rep to walk through the registration process can call 1-877-727-7387. That's 1-877-727-7387. I'd like to thank Doug Casey for joining us on today's programme, and thank you very much for listening. Until next time, goodbye.